Continuing our IAMPHENOM coverage this week, you're going to hear about how United Airlines screens candidates using kind of this one-way interview, or basically an invite to apply, where they share their interview answers with the hiring managers through the Phenom technology. So check it out.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jess Austin, and I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition, Programs, Processes, and Systems, so it's a mouthful. We have a little acronym called TAPS, but we are responsible for really streamlining the process for recruiters, implementing Phenom, and helping our recruiters do what they need to do and focus on more strategic priorities than admin work. So we're excited to talk to you a little bit about one-way interview today. I'm going to hand it over to Nikki to introduce herself as well.
Hi, I am Nikki Jaskowitz. I'm the girl in yellow and she's the girl in pink. I'm the senior manager on the talent acquisition process, programs, procedures, whatever you want to call it, team, or as Jess said, TAPS. And I always like to say our job is to really help recruiters do their best work. On our team specifically, I focus a lot on Phenom and how we get our recruiters up and running and understanding how to use the tool for their lines of business. So super excited to share some insights with you today.
And I'm sorry, I had to stand up because I didn't know if I would be able to see the numbers on the teleprompter today, so here I am without my glasses. So our journey began with Phenom about 2 years ago. Basically when I started at United, I came in, they were like, we bought this great tool, we're going to implement it, this is going to be your primary job that you need to do here at United. So you can see in the visual, anything in gray were really either tools that we didn't have or tools that were separate from our system of record. We use old school Taleo, so we did have Smashfly on top of that, but it didn't really offer us an integrated solution that we were looking for. So we did look for a tool that could really help us solve for some of the business situations that we were running up against. We wanted some flexibility in managing our own career site, managing events, our recruiter experience, how we could do one-way interviews, interviewing scheduling, all these things that take so much time for a recruiter to do day-to-day. We were looking for a solution for that. So you can kind of see by the bottom picture, our talent ecosystem has evolved and we have populated those gray boxes. They're now blue, so it means there is a solution in place. And we continue on our journey. We are still implementing. I will go over the next slide. So this is kind of our timeline. We launched our career site in September of 22. So it was really our career site and the events module. And those were big wins for us because we could manage the site ourselves and also host events and get that organic campaign advertising that we were looking for. We have a lot of really savvy recruiters that use LinkedIn a lot, so I'm sure you guys see our posts. Always promoting the events, always trying to promote jobs that we have. So try to leverage our career site to just really post those events and any kind of openings that we have. December 22, we had an initial group test the waters in Phenom. So we built one of the workflows for our corporate roles, and they went live using the system, kind of giving us feedback, testing the waters a little bit. And then we went live with all of our corporate recruiters in May of 2023. So almost a year ago today. And we did some staggered rollouts for some of the functionality, and one of those things was one-way interview. We did use another tool prior to going to Phenom, and we had interviews already set up. So what we wanted to do was look at those, see if we could build them in Phenom, and really offer the recruiters, hey, this is built for you already. You can start leveraging this in the new tool, which will also allow you to do your scheduling there and your sourcing and screening. So all in one solution where they're not toggling back and forth between the two tools. We also started our journey on the internal career site. So our internal career site went live in September of last year, and that also, is really empowering our internal colleagues to look at jobs, and we're also getting the benefits of having a fit score and the integrated solution for our internal candidates as well. The last couple months, we've been on a journey to get our high volume hiring, our frontline roles. So if you think of an airline, that's our customer service representatives, the ramp people, the people that are doing the mechanics, and our flight attendants. So, and I don't know how many airline people out here, but flight attendant recs are an animal that you've never seen before. 15,000 applications every time we open the requisition. There's Facebook pages that draw people to say the rec is open, go apply. So it's quite a phenomenon, and I had never experienced that before. So we are working right now to hopefully launch a flight attendant requisition in Phenom and try to leverage the one-way interviews and everything else that goes along with that. So we're excited to make that happen very soon. But our goal is to have everyone on the system by the end of year 2024, using the tools and really executing everything in Phenom. So that is our journey so far. And I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we're using it.
Excellent. And if you're a recruiter and you've ever opened up a rec and wondered how you're going to get through everybody, our flight attendant rec got over 8,000 people in one day. So the next time you're stressed out, you just think about that. As they shared, we have been using video interviews in a lot of different ways to support a lot of different roles. So we have our frontline positions, which we said are like flight attendants, customer service, etc. We've actually been using one-way interviews in another tool for a long time, and every flight attendant actually gets a one-way interview. We are in the process, literally as we speak, of transitioning from the other tool into Phenom so that we can have a one full integrated solution. So you don't have to build all the integrations. You don't have to have all these extra step statuses in your ATS, right? Because you got to update them to a status to get them to the other tool and get them back and all that fun stuff. Using Phenom really eliminates having to do that. And as a result, I don't think I put this as a bullet point, it's also allowing us to rethink our workflows overall and consolidate, step statuses too, because we don't need some of those those integrations. So, as Jess shared in July last summer, we went through a cutover process, and we are still, in the journey of getting everybody there. All of our folks who do like corporate hiring and that kind of regular one-to-one or one-to-couple hiring, we're easily using the tool, and we are in the process of continuing to build it out for frontline and basically moving it out of our current solution into our new one. And that, as just shared, is kind of our goal by the end of 2024, that we're doing all of our hiring with all of the functionality that we can in Phenom. And so some of the reasons for the one-way interviews that we've really brought it into the tool, as you'll see on the screen. Number one is inefficiencies. When you have multiple point solutions, you have all of those integrations, and which leads me to the second bullet point, which is a dependency on that. As I just talked about a little bit, you have to maintain those integrations. If something goes down, then you're chasing down your friends in IT to figure out where the API went wrong and all that good stuff. So the less we can reduce that, the better. Obviously, moving from the tool that we've been using for 3, 4, 5 years into Phenom required change management, which is why we tried our best to build the assessments or the interview questions that they already had, and let everybody know that, hey, this is available for you. We also have had robust training decks that we have available for them. And we're constantly sharing updates. I think even when we went live with one-way interviews, they had a different name and got rebranded, last summer. So the one thing with Phenom, it's a journey, and they're usually right along there, with us to get our teams where they need to be. And obviously, it doesn't impact just recruiters. It impacts hiring managers, because now they're not getting the one-way interviews in the old tool, they're getting them in Phenom. So we also had to update our hiring manager materials and make sure that they were aware of how they would now be seeing the information.
All right. So we have, since last May, we've sent out 5,000 one-way interviews. We've had over 200 jobs that we've had those one-way interviews tied to. So you don't have to have every requisition you have out there. You can do it for select roles. 28% increase month over month in usage since we went live. So again, that also talks to our migration of our recruiters onto the system. And 30% average requisitions where recruiters are using one-way interviews. What are our customers saying, our candidates saying about this? And I think this slide speaks volumes. More than 97% of our candidates ranked it a 4 or 5. So I think the ease of use is one of the biggest drivers for that feedback. We've had more than 2/3 of our candidates were invited, completed it. So again, that 69% conversion rate. And one of the good things is we compared that to our former tool, and it was right around that same line. So we did not lose anything from moving from our previous vendor to Phenom as well. And our time to complete decreased by 93%. So people are doing it quicker. It's easier to connect on these devices and complete that task. So I will hand it over to Nikki.
Yeah, and I'll just be very brief so we can answer some questions. But when you implement the one-way interview tool as well, there is automatic options to get feedback from your candidates. So we just pulled up a couple of the obviously nicer things that people have said. They said it was a lot easier. They liked having test questions. The way that we actually have our flight attendant one-way interview set up, and this is how they had it in their old system and how they're setting up the new system. They actually have a different person and ask the questions, so they can kind of get a different flavor of different leaders and recruiters throughout that process. So we got some feedback. I liked how every recruiter had a question. It felt like I was in the room with them. It's a new way of interviewing. More companies should do this. So. The candidates that give us good feedback seem to really like it, and our recruiters. I think sometimes recruiter experience gets lost when we're always thinking about the candidate and the hiring manager experience. But our recruiters, who are using it are feeling good about it too. They're feeling like it's more flexible. We had one of our recruiters, share that they hire some folks in different languages, so it's easy to replay it. And better understand, what they said, particularly if somebody who's listening to it may not been their first language, and the hiring manager, decision making, as well as being able to, in the same platform where they're reviewing the profiles and where they're maybe evaluating the interview, they can also evaluate the one-way interview. So, and then, lastly, just not having to jump back and forth between all these, different systems. It's simply a tab, within the requisition in Phenom. And you can also do things like bring in the one-way interview evaluation rating into your view as a recruiter. So lots of really cool things you can do with it all being in one system. So that is the show. We're happy to take any questions.
That's great. How long is the hiring process overall for flight attendants? And of those 15,000, how many did you end up hiring?
That's a great question. I think the class size is usually about 50 to 100 flight attendants in each one. Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah.
We have our expert in the back row, so yeah. So that's usually the size, and they go for a rigorous 6 weeks of training. They're staying on site in Houston, so it's a commitment, so that is kind of the results we are seeing.
What percentage of your applicants are you sending the one-way interviews to out of 8,000?
Yeah, I think it was about 30% of the jobs. So we, not all roles it's not a good fit for all the roles, right? So we are using it where generally we have a lot of volume and we need to have some way of evaluating people in front of, putting them in front of the hiring leader.
So you send it to everyone who's applied?
After we've screened them.
Okay.
So we usually do a screening. Actually, we're just introducing a recruiter phone screen even before we move to the next piece of it. So our recruiters are doing some diligence on those candidates before they're getting that one-way interview. Yeah, I think the flight attendant is a little different. They all get it if they pass the minimum qualifications.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, what we were trying to hit on, the difference between how we're doing it with our frontline versus like corporate professional roles. for like flight attendants, once we have it fully rolled out, anybody who basically passes the assessment and is like eligible for rehire and all that fun stuff will like automatically get the one-way interview. On our more corporate side, because you're generally reviewing all of your candidates, it's a little, bit more nuanced. They're generally going in, reviewing candidates, and deciding with the hiring manager if they should, if they're going to do a phone screen or a one-way interview, and then setting up the one-way interview and sending it kind of in lieu of that, that phone screen. So a little bit more fluid on corporate, a little bit more obviously rigid on frontline.
And I know I saw on the slide that you said you did training with, looks like your team, hiring managers. I'm curious. We have used one-way interviewing before, and there can be biases. So I'm just curious on how you have handled that with hiring managers and any biases that, or unconscious biases that could come through that. And then question, is there an ability to give feedback to the candidate after they do the one-way interview? Because that's also something that I've heard in the past, that there was not any feedback. They spent all this time to complete the video and they hear nothing or don't get specific feedback. So just thinking about the candidate experience and the personalization.
So a couple things happen. Obviously the candidates can rank their experience with the one-way interview, so that was some of the feedback that we shared. We are actually thinking about doing surveys out to people during different spots in the process. We just haven't been there yet because we're still in our journey to launch. The bias question is a great question, and we are still navigating that, and I think it's a huge topic. Everybody's trying to reduce a bias, and obviously there's a lot of conversations around the AI and how it does reduce some of that bias as part of this. So that is something that we're still evaluating kind of on that journey, along with our diversity team and our legal team, and really trying to make sure that, are we training our hiring leaders and giving them the tools to make sure they have that unconscious bias and eliminating that while they're looking at things, and then also our recruiters. So that is something that we are really working on right now, and haven't done that officially yet. Great question.
And just to add on to that, in terms of change management, it was more of a tool change. We had one-way interviews in our process for a while, so that's what we were talking to Marcus. We're like, our story is more, we've moved from the tool that we were using to Phenom, not so much we were just implementing one-way interviews. And then you also said about getting candidate feedback. So we've also, this kind of goes into a different part of Phenom, have built automations whenever people hit different rejected step statuses or hiring status or ATS status, whatever you call it, they actually automatically get a no thank you letter 48 hours later. So you're able to build those, and I think you could further build automations, which we haven't, to say if a manager says, thumbs down on the interview, it automatically dispositions them and then could send a communication as well. I haven't tested that, so I don't stand by it, but I think you can do it.
I think there's a couple over here.
I can be loud.
Okay.
Do you typically use it for experienced hiring, or do you leverage it for university recruiting at all? And have you seen a difference in engagement from the candidate perspective?
They did use it for some interns, and I would say the way that we hire interns, like once they've applied to a requisition, kind of falls into a similar bucket as like the corporate, role that they'll set it up for that intern rec and then invite people to do it. They again, I don't think we have it as every intern does, a one-way interview. Again, it's, maybe it makes more sense for our IT interns versus like a finance intern. But then for our corporate roles, again, they are doing it if they think it is better fit than just a phone screen. And then the front line is a more, yes, you get it as part of the process if you meet qualifications.
I think we're wrapping up. We're getting a little
Another episode of RecTech is in the books. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com, where you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. RecTech Media helps keep employers and recruiters up to date through our podcasts, webinars, and articles. So be sure to check out our other sites, Recruiting Headlines and HR Podcasters, to stay on top of recruiting industry trends. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast.